Hi everyone, this is Kate Motaung from 5minutefriday.com, and today I'm here with Adriel Booker. Hi Adriel.
Hi, Kate.
Thanks so much
Nice
for
to
being
meet you.
here.
Thank you for inviting me. Hello from the future.
Yes, Adriel and I are in very different time zones and different hemispheres. You can see she's got her sleeveless top on. She's in Australia, and it's currently Wednesday there. And
That's right.
right now it's still Tuesday night in Michigan, and we are in the midst of a snowstorm. So I am all bundled up with my hot tea and my scarf. But I'm so thankful for technology that we can have conversations like this in different time zones and hemispheres.
Me too.
For those listening, we are on chapter 6, moving through the series of interviews, going through topics from the book Influence, Building a Platform that Elevates Jesus, Not Me. And chapter 6 is called Pride, which is not a very popular topic, but as I'll mention in just a bit, we actually quote Adriel in chapter 6. So I'm very excited to have her with us today. Adriel, before we dive into some of these questions, can you tell listeners a bit more about yourself and about your work?
Sure, love to. Well, my name's Adriel, and I have been living overseas. I'm American, you can probably tell by my accent, but I've been living in Australia for close to 20 years now. So I'm an immigrant here. I am Australian, and my husband and I run a local branch of a international missions movement. So we've got a ministry startup here that we are pioneering together. And I'm also a writer, of course. My first book came out last year, Grace Like Scarlet, Grieving with Hope After Miscarriage and Loss. And so I've been writing online for about 9 years actually. And then last year, my first book came out. I've been working in and out of social media for many years. Well, really since it came up, and sort of in the communications world since, more than 20 years. So I love this world. I understand this world. I grapple with this world on a daily basis. And I'm excited to share in this conversation.
Well, I appreciate you being willing. Adriel and I are both part of Hope Writers, which is where I actually originally found the quote that I asked for your permission to use. So I've been grateful to be part of that community with you as well. I'm curious, have you been able to maintain your accent quite well in living in Australia for that long, or are you switching for us now that you're talking to a fellow American?
No, I'm pretty set, I think, with my American accent because of the missions movement that we work with. We have a team, an international team. So I think if I was just immersed with Australians, my accent might have changed a bit more, but because we're very international, I think it's stuck. And now I'm in my 40s, so it's not going anywhere.
You're right. I'm asking because I married a South African and lived in Cape Town for 10 years. And there were times when teams of American missionaries would come to Cape Town and not realize that I was American because my accent had shifted while I was there. And now that we're back, hopefully it's back, but
yes,
not really intentionally.
I think I disappoint people with the American accent. They assume I should sound much more Australian by now, but maybe I'm stubborn. I don't know. I like my American roots. So.
Yes, great. All right, well, let's dive into some of these questions I have for you. First of all, in your work as a Christian author and writer, what unhelpful and unhealthy trends have you observed on social media and online in general?
Oh, it's such a fraught topic, isn't it? I mean, there's so many unhelpful trends, and I suppose that we each deal with different ones according to our own sort of personality and normal character strengths and weaknesses. I think one of the things that I've really observed is just this temptation to become really one-dimensional. And I know, especially as I've moved into the world of, finding a book deal and sort of showcasing my platform to publishers and that kind of thing, which really matters to them. It's very easy to get swept up in I just fit in this little bubble and this is me because this is the message that I really want to bring. And I think that's difficult for us because we do want to build around a particular message. And yet no one is a one-dimensional person. There's a lot more to our lives. that is easy to show in tweets and squares and all of that. So I think that's one of the things, is just becoming, or feeling like we need to become one-dimensional in order to fit, some sort of mold or standard. And I think the other thing that I've really noticed, I don't know, particularly since the rise of Instagram, is that I feel like the shift in social media has become much more about building a brand than spreading a message. And I know those two things are really closely intertwined, and they don't need to be at odds with each other, but they can be at odds with each other. And so, as I've observed people that are really good at their jobs, whether they're Christians or not Christians, but I think you can get really swept up in building a brand and actually forget about your message and who you're serving and what that brand is for. I don't personally, and I don't think most of us like to be considered as a brand. We're human beings. And it's a very weird culture that we sort of find ourselves in, when all of a sudden we're looked at as a brand. And, is what I'm going to post, does it fit with my brand? Does it fit with, this sort of predetermined, well, sometimes predetermined, sometimes we're making it up as we go, but does it fit with this overall thing that I'm trying to achieve? And it really changes social media for us if that is, the primary goal.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. I mentioned in chapter 6 of the book Influence that we do share a quote that you posted in the Hope Writers group. And part of that quote says, too many platform builders are so concerned about building their brand, as you just mentioned, that they're making their own image an idol. And you say that none of us are exempt from this pull. How have you experienced that pull in your own life as you've interacted online?
I mean, how have I not experienced it? You have to be so careful, I think, as a consumer, as a social media consumer, and really realize how much that influences your output. So for me, it's very easy to get kind of sucked into comparison, and most of the time we're not cognizant that we're comparing, but we are doing it, and we're watching other people and their message unfold. We're watching their beautiful feeds or their eloquent words, and kind of there's that really quick but subtle, but really, really quick, instantaneous measuring stick almost that we bring out and go, how am I measuring up? And so for me, comparison has been huge. Yeah. And yeah, just there is a pull to, I don't know, maybe communicate your life in such a way that promotes you personally before your message. And so, I don't know, idolatry is a strong word, but I stand by that. I think we can make idols out of anything, even ourselves and the image that we want to portray to others. And if we're spending more time sort of curating and crafting our image, then it's probably become an idol. We've got to ask hard questions before the Lord.
Yeah, that's excellent. Excellent point, and hard things to deal with, but so important that we work through, particularly as Christians online, interacting in that way. And I think a lot of this sort of wanting to put forth that perfect image of ourselves, a lot of that boils down to pride, wouldn't you say? That it's just wanting to save face almost, or not show the messy, ugly parts, and not really humble ourselves and show our weaknesses, but to really maintain that sense of self-sufficiency and I can do this, I've got it kind of mentality. And yet pride can sometimes come across as one of those quote unquote respectable sins that people don't really think it's that big of a deal. But why would you say that Christian influencers in particular need to be careful about the presence of pride in their hearts? Is that an issue that you think is important? And if so, why would you say it's a big deal?
Of course it's a big deal. And I think, influence or not, pride is, the sin that we struggle with the most. And one of the things I find interesting about pride is very insidious, and it sneaks in when we're not looking for it, when we're not aware. And I think there's two forms of pride, and there's sort of the pride that manifest as arrogance and entitlement and ego. But there's also the flip side. You know, I know my husband and I teach young people and disciple young people, and we often talk about superior pride and inferior pride. And inferior pride is just as bad, but it comes in different forms. And that's where you are measuring yourself and deeming yourself unworthy, or that you're not measuring up. And both of those are pride. And the reason they're both pride is because they're not seeing yourself as God sees you. They're elevating yourself, or you're putting yourself down. But either way, it's not humility, which is being known for who you are before the Lord and for others. And I think, you know, I've definitely had times where I will waver between the two of those, sometimes in the same day. And I'll feel entitled, and why am I not being recognized for this? And, you know, but then there's other times in that very same day where I'm going, oh, no one cares. And, you know, I'm not the right person for the job. And so I get into that more self-pity or insecure. And both of those actually hold us back from being our true selves and offering what we have to the world and to the Lord. And so I think that, you know, why is that important for influencers, Christian authors or writers or whatever to consider? Well, it's important because people are listening and people are following, whether you are aware or not. You know, I think sometimes we feel like, oh, people only follow when we're doing great things, and, you know, no one notices the rest, but people notice all of it. And so, you know, what are we operating out of? That's what we're going to reproduce. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think it's very important, because our outlook on life and our outlook on ourselves and our position before the Lord, that's going to affect how we handle our work. It's going to affect how we approach our message and the language we put around our message. It's going to approach how we serve people. It affect how we serve people. I mean, all of it. So none of it's exempt when we're operating in pride, and no Christian is exempt from pride. It's something that is a constant thing that we need to be bringing before the Lord and asking Him to form maturity in us, so that we're not operating either in that superior pride that's arrogant and entitled, or that inferior pride, which is insecure and afraid.
Yeah, I love how you bring both sides to it, because often most people will think of just the one type of pride where you're sort of puffed up and arrogant, but they don't realize that the other side is also a form of pride. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. Adriel, what remedy or solution would you suggest for this often present yet sometimes subtle sin of pride that you said it is so sneaky and it's so easy for it to creep in, often when we are not realizing it or don't intend to be prideful? It's there anyway. How would you advise people who struggle with this, or maybe are just now realizing that they struggle with it, to deal with it in their own hearts?
You know, this is going to sound simple, and it actually is simple. It doesn't mean it's easy, but simple. And that we, as Christians, so I'm talking 100% from a Christian viewpoint, we have to be willing to bring our souls before the Lord and ask the hard question every single day. You know, and I think on a very practical level, you can do things like, you know, a spiritual practice like the daily examine, or, you know, different things where you come before the Lord and actually very honestly say, God, search my heart. Where am I today? Am I operating in pride? Am I operating in inferiority or arrogance? And show me. And I think when I have taken the time, and it's not like we need hours, but when I've taken the deliberate time to pause and ask those hard questions, God is very faithful to show me. And the Holy Spirit, the way He operates is with sharpness and conviction. It's not vague. So if there is something, if there's an area, you know immediately, as soon as you slow down and ask, God is very happy to graciously correct us. And so when we give Him the opportunity, He always will. So I think that's the first thing I would say, is how often are we getting our hearts quiet before the Lord and actually inviting Him to say, Lord, where am I operating in pride? Not, hey, am I operating in pride, but where? Yeah. Because the chances are very high that there's some sort of pride in operation in our lives. And then to just be quick to deal with it right there and right then. And I think the other thing that I would say as well is to practice the discipline of confession, and not just before the Lord, but before others. And so I don't mean that you need to use social media to confess all your sins, but in an appropriate way. Who are you inviting into your life that you can be really honest with? And there's so much power in confession, whether you're confessing to your spouse that I have been seeing this area in my life. I'm struggling with pride, or, for writers, it might be your writers group, or even, a colleague that's a friend, but also someone you respect, and actually learning to keep yourself accountable. You don't wait for other people to hold you accountable, but you make yourself accountable. That's something that we always teach our young people. We can't wait for other people to call us up. We've got to be coming to them. So those to me are a couple practical things. And I think the other thing I would say too is asking this question of, am I operating out of who I am and in my zone of, some people call it like your zone of genius, or the Christian-y word would be, am I operating in my gifting and my calling? But I think it's important to be asking those questions, especially when you are working in the world of social media, or writing, because social media is part of the job, but your zone of genius might be writing articles for publication, or writing long form in books, or, whatever it is your area. And if you're spending a lot of your work hours outside of that, then you're probably not being true to who you are, which is usually because of some form of pride that you feel you got to keep up with this, or make this appearance, or look like this to others. And so that's another, I think, really practical question that we can ask is, how much time am I spending what I'm truly called to do? And if it's not the right ratio, then there's probably some pride that's helping you to make some unhealthy decisions.
Right. Oh, that makes so much sense. Thanks for breaking it down like that for us in such practical ways. Sure. So last question I have for you. You mentioned earlier on about the temptation to build a brand, and to, particularly on Instagram, say, for example, the idea of just having this brand as opposed to your normal self, everyday life. What practical tips or advice would you offer for Christian writers who often fall into that temptation and tendency to want to build their own name or their own brand, when we know as Christians we're called to build up the Lord's name and elevate Him?
Mm-hmm. I mean, if there was a simple formula to this, we would all be following it, right? I think that, again, it starts with asking ourselves hard questions. Am I doing this because I'm seeking validation? Am I doing this because I just want to be popular? I mean, is it actually about popularity, which feels so shallow to say that as adults, but the pull is there. It started in high school or whatever. And, for some of us, has it left? And so asking that hard question, is this just about the numbers and being popular? Or is it actually about pursuing as many people as possible with the message of God's goodness, in whatever form, your message of His goodness takes place? So I don't think it's bad to build a brand. I hope that I didn't come across as saying that. A brand is not a bad thing, but what is the reason for the brand? What is the message? And how do you prevent yourself from becoming one-dimensional, and so that you're not just a brand, but you're actually a follower of Christ? Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, I think 1 Corinthians chapter 11, he says, follow me as I follow Christ. And of course, then there's a whole lot of context around that, but I often think of that, and I think, am I following Christ? Like, if I'm asking people to follow me, where am I leading them to, and who am I following? And if I'm not following Christ closely, then why should they follow me? Like, what am I trying to replicate here? And so that's another, I think, litmus test for us, and question that we can ask ourselves is, if I'm asking people to follow me, or I'm hoping they'll follow me, or I'm working in such a way that will attract people to follow me, is that because I just want to be popular, or is that because I'm actually trying to build something that's others centric? So again, you know, business is business, and it's not bad to build a brand, and I'm all for it. Actually, I think there's really a place for that. As authors, I think it is tricky because it's tied with our personal self and our personal life. And so I don't know that there's a balance, you know, that you can say, well, if you're doing X, Y, Z, then it's good. If you're doing A, B, C, then it's not, because it isn't intertwined. But I think we know, because when we're not operating in such a way that is for others, you know it. Mm-hmm. You know it. Like if you pause long enough to ask yourself the question, you know, is this for me, or am I actually doing this for others? Mm-hmm. And I think you know it when you see other influencers online as well. Mm-hmm. You know, you can see when people are doing it for others, because even if they're sharing about their own life, they're doing it in such a way that is making you think for yourself, or it's inspiring you in a certain direction, or it's pointing you to something. So I think there's a way to do it. And I think there's so many women and men doing it really, really well. So yeah, but it all comes back to that question: what's the motivation?
Yeah. Thank you so much. This was such practical and helpful advice. And I know these are hard questions, as you mentioned, but so important, especially for Christians who are interacting online. So thank you so much again for sharing with us. Adriel, can you tell listeners where they can find you online?
Sure. You can find me at Adriel Booker is the easiest. So adrielbooker.com. And that's my name on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the places. And then the various sort of branches of our ministry go out from there. But I think that's the easiest and central place to find me.
Oh, thank you. We'll be sure to share those links on the post that's associated with this interview. And once again, I really appreciate you being here. For those who are listening, if you've missed other videos and interviews in this series, you can find those at 5minutefriday.com/influence series. Adriel, thank you again.
Thanks for having me, Kate.
Bye.